Yeah.
You had a fairly unique opportunity while you were deployed as the weapons officer for the Vipers in Bagram, because that was right around the time that the MOAB was dropped. Did you have anything to do with that?
uh, yeah, so I was there when the conversation come up for like I guess sitting looking back at it, like the conversation for that particular weapon come up several times, and then all of a sudden it got put to paper by somebody. I'm not for sure who it was, but I get a call from a very close friend of mine, Jeff Leahy, and he's like, "Hey, I got this guy you need to talk to." I was like, "Well, put him on phone." He's like, "Nah, I need you to come over here and talk to him." So I go over there to talk to him, and I get with this guy. He was the fires support officer, and for the larger entity on that side. And he called as soon as I walk in. He is all about telling me about this wonderful weapon that he found and how they want to use it and all these things. And I won't go into extreme details
Yeah,
about it, but I just thought I just I just thought it was a terrible idea. Like this is a big weapon. We're already having a problem with proportionality, and we want to do this huge weapon over there, right? So uh, I talked to him. I looked for other weapons to use for this targets that he had. Like I pulled out a weapons file. I had like three different weapons files because like the one that I found was like 2012, because you never can find the current year weapons file until it's like 5 years
yep.
old. So found a 2012, then I found a 13, and then I got online. I found another one that was about a year. I think that was in 16, so about 2015 or 14. I think it was a 14, 14, 15 one, and I started looking on there, and I just and then I got with the weapons officer who was flying with the 16 bros out there, and I talked to him about them, and and then here's being ammo. So back when I was ammo, there was a guy that was my supervisor. He was actually the senior in the bomb dump down in I believe it was Al-Udeid, and I just happened to run into him as I was coming in the country. So I reached out to him about all the components of the weapon, and I was like, "Hey, do you have these components, and do you have this body to make these weapons?" And he's like, "Yeah." Well, he's like, "Let me check." So he did some checking, and he found all the components, told me how many they could make of them, all these things, and what they're shipping. And then I got with the chief over in the bomb dump there at Bagram, and we had it set up that they could have them in country within 3 to 4 days, and the bomb dump there at Bagram had them prepared for the aircraft within a 24-hour turnaround. And with the weapons officer flying with the 16s, they could have the right things on the aircraft to be able to carry those weapons. And then so I took that information in to present to him, like, "Hey, here, this target set doesn't really require this weapon. Here's a suitable sub that is much more cost effective to put on this target set." um, he didn't like that because it wasn't the MOAB, of course. That was that was his baby, which I get it. You get passionate about something and you want to stick to it. So I was passionate about not using the MOAB, so I stayed passionate about that. And we just went back and forth, back and forth. Well, ended up that specific target set, we didn't use the MOAB on. We actually used one of the weapon sets that I recommended at the time. So we didn't use it on that target set because there was a lot of other issues that we really can't talk about here but there was a lot of other issues with it that drove us to have to go with something different. And being able to find them different avenues to attack this target set was pretty huge. So then we go on. I thought that was the end of this MOAB conversation. I thought I finally squashed it. Everything is good. And then we come to this big planning event for some other thing, and here it is presented again. I'm like, where is this thing coming from? Why does this thing just keep coming back up? Oh my goodness. So, we talk and we keep kicking the can down the road. And finally, one day I walk in, and the one gentleman that was helping plan is like, "Hey, this guy wants to see you." And he was one of the top dogs there. And I go in, and he's like, "Nasty, I heard you don't like this MOAB idea." And I was like, No, I don't. I think proportionality has been thrown out of the window. I think we're just wasting time just planning this thing when we don't even have these weapons in country and stuff like that. He's like, well, that's why I want you on the planning committee because I need a naysayer. So I was part with those guys planning it and getting everything set up right and making sure like all these little things that even I seen in the first target set that we're actually paying closer attention to so they don't become problems as well. Constantly letting the guys know that I don't think this is the best weapon to use, but if we're going to use it, let's use it right type deal. And eventually we got to the point where it was set up to go, and of course between weather and some other things happening in the world, we got sort of stood down. And then eventually, man, everything was set up and good to go, and I bounced from country, and probably 10 days later we employed the weapon. So I got to do all the planning and see all this stuff, and then I go home and I wake up to the news that this weapon was used, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, so I start reaching out to everybody I knew still over there, and they're like, oh yeah, they're just telling me all the backgrounds to it and stuff like that. I'm like, man, like all that work I didn't even get to see it live.
Oh man, they were just waiting for you to leave. That's all it was. They're like, we got to
They
get this
was.
dude out of here so that we can finally drop this thing. I'm glad you brought that up about the whole JTAC thing because about reaching out to people and figuring out what components and doing the research on the weapons because like there's a lot of weapons in the inventory. The weapons are constantly evolving as well, and like it's all we ever see is on the OP or in a firefight, bombs being dropped, target blown up. You don't know, we don't talk about it because it's not as, interesting. All the planning that goes into servicing a target or weapon selection, weaponeering to a target, like all that falls into that whole, joint terminal attack controller, TACP, combat control mission set whenever employing precision strikes. So I'm glad you brought that up. And that's not to say that every single JTAC is reaching out to ammo saying, hey, do you have this component, this component? That is very specific to the weapons officer, especially the position that you were holding there. But
yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And I think that's one of the things like, being one of the instructor cadre for the weapons school, like that's something we never had in our career fields up until, you guys stood it up. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I think dudes, and I'm glad that, new guys don't know the difference from not having a guy like a graduate at their squadron, because the differences in the dudes, you can talk to A-10 pilots, F-16 pilots, they'll say, dude, a squadron that shows up to do CAS with a patch is night and day difference between a squadron that doesn't have a patch, because they're more ingrained in the scenarios, making them realistic, making them to the current fight, and making dudes dig and do research on the things that they want or the things they want to do. So that's huge. I think, yeah, we as JTACs, you're taught to allow the aircraft to weaponeer. One of the things I found out is I absolutely allow the pilots to weaponeer their weapons, but as long as I can advise that ground commander first about the weapons effects, and knowing the weapons and what kind of effects they can provide helps then get me to sell what the pilots are briefing they want to employ on that target. Because at the end of the day, I become a used car salesman at that point, because I got to sell what the pilots are recommending to put on the target, because that ground commander at the end of the day is going to buy that weapon, and it's whatever he wants up to that point. But if I understand the effects, I can already get that prep, the battlefield prep, and then when the pilots give me their recommendation, I can take that recommendation to them and probably get it approved instantly, compared to trying to go back and forth, have that back and forth with them.
So